everyone. My name is Lauren Evans, and I will be arguing debate number 3, which is about suspending human rights. I chose side A, which I'm sure for a lot of leftists is a lot more controversial. It seems to more support the more conservative side. So side A is about how sometimes a state, and I'm going to talk mostly about the United States, sometimes have to suspend protecting human rights based on security reasons, and the main one I'm going to focus on is like cybersecurity and any kind of terrorism act. So the first thing I want to address is about human rights in general. Human rights, what they are, is these inherent rights that we're just born with. So we are expected to have these rights protected regardless of the government. So if I go into another country, my basic human rights would still be protected. So that's the whole purpose of having these, is so that we're treated like human beings. We aren't unfairly tried for crimes that maybe we didn't commit, maybe we did, but that we're still treated as a human being, regardless of where we are in the world. So a lot of that is based on immigration in the United States. So this is what I think that the debate is mostly focusing on, is whether or not we should be suspending these basic human rights for not only the citizens of the United States, but also the people who are trying to immigrate into the United States. So I think that because these basic human rights are just considered inherently entitled rights, it's kind of difficult to decide whether or not the government has the right to take that away. That's something that the government has given us, that they've all agreed around the world that this is something that we should be able to have. So on what grounds should they be able to take that away? So I think that the most important job of the government is to basically secure the general welfare and to protect the people of the country that the government is representing. So I think that because of this, security is kind of a common thing that we might take for granted sometimes, especially national security. That's what our government works to protect, and if they aren't able to protect that, then we are at risk. So because that security is almost promised to anybody who lives in the country, I think that it's very easily taken for granted, and we don't really recognize how our government is going about protecting us. So because of the fact that our government is also supposed to protect these human rights, again, the debate is whether or not they should be able to take them away, even though it's something that they have agreed we are able to have on our own, regardless of any government. One person I wanted to talk about specifically is an old philosopher, John Locke. He talks about a social contract in society. So he says that basically as you enter a society, if you want to become part of it, then you automatically are signing this social contract, which agrees that you will participate in such a way that you are reflecting the proper way or the social guidelines of that society. So it's meant to protect the citizens' freedom, because without that, if there's no social contract, then there's no nationality, there's no nation within the state. So I think that it's okay to give up some of these basic human rights that we have if we're protecting something that is inherent in our culture. Like if we don't have any kind of society, we don't have any nation, and then eventually we might not have a state either. So I think that it's important for us to be willing to give up these human rights so long as we necessarily need to. And because of these possible violations, we created the Patriot Act after 9/11, and the Patriot Act protects things like it has enhanced domestic security, it enhanced the surveillance, there's more border security, there's improved intelligence. The Patriot Act was basically a new act that was supposed to protect us. It was another way that the government is able to look out for us, and because we often think that since historically there haven't been a significant amount of terrorist attacks, we can't just assume that there won't be any more. So something like this is protecting us from a horrible incident such as 9/11. another problem is because it was this terrorist act came from outside of the United States, then that brings up the issue of immigration. So in regards to immigration, we have to look out for the people who are actually citizens of the United States. So if there's a threat based on these people who are immigrating, they come from a country that's prone to terrorist acts, a lot of the times, to look out for the best interests of the people in the society, sometimes we have to overlook those human rights of the people who are fleeing from their country and maybe seeking asylum, because we have to protect the people who are already in the United States. So we can't just assume that these people, just because they're seeking help, that's all they're looking for is help and aid, and that they're going to respect and naturalize within the United States. That's just something that we would be blind to just automatically assume is the case. So I think that in order to look out for the people of this beautiful country that we're living in, we have to be willing to give up basic human rights as immigrants coming into this country. And sometimes we have to give up our basic human rights in regards to things like the Patriot Act or extra surveillance. Like, we now have monitoring on our internet access, on our phones, anywhere. We have people who are looking over what we're doing. There are plenty of jokes I'm sure you've seen on social media about how the FBI is always watching you. So we're kind of giving up like one of our rights of security and personal privacy in order to better protect ourselves. So sometimes it's just like a give and take. So if you give a little bit, you're able to receive just a little bit more protection, and then it's less likely that you will end up being the victim of a terrorist attack. So just because we have these rights doesn't mean that we're able to execute them in the way that we might want to. So because we have, for example, like the freedom of speech, that doesn't mean we can say whatever we want. It just means we can say mostly whatever we want. So if I decided that I wanted to go into an airplane and yell, oh my God, there's a fire! There's no fire, but I just put everybody else in complete panic. Like, that's against the law to yell something like that while you're on an airplane. But I'm just executing my freedom of speech, aren't I? No. So we have to kind of give up a little bit of the things that we think that we have in order to benefit on the other end of it. So if I give up a little bit of my freedom of speech, I'm able to have a longer list of things that I am allowed to say, rather than having to enforce stricter guidelines there. So I think that it is okay to give up a certain amount of human rights, so long as it is for the betterment of the country, for the betterment of the people, and that is protecting the people who the government is supposed to be protecting.